Alrighty, so we're gonna start today by covering a little bit of what we discussed last class. And I want to do this because I went somewhat quickly last class in some of the concepts. And that was because, folks wanted to go to the Celebrate webinar, which again, it was, I wanted to go and I did go. It was actually pretty good. So I wanted to kind of, not cut short, but went a little bit quickly on that. So I introduced yesterday how to start working with a SQLite database. And this introduction that I gave you is premised in the fact that you know pretty much 90% of what's here. And let's take accounting in where we're at right now, right? I mean, we've been doing this for what, 2 months maybe, more or less, I guess. And we cover, over almost maybe 200 pages of this book, like this big chunk. So we went from knowing nothing to knowing how to create our Python scripts, how to navigate the flow of data, right? In Python, which is top down, right? Top down. That's how Python works. Left to right, like that. We learned some data structures like lists. And we learned ifs, else's, how to use for to iterate through a file structure or data structure, I should say. We learned how to use the dot notation, right, to execute, or I say execute, but kind of call on different functions and methods and all that good stuff. So we've done a lot of growing since we've been together. And from this script that I made, I wanted to again emphasize the point of this chapter, which is making functions and how you import them to use them. Like in this case, we're importing SQLite 3 from the Python standard library to work with our databases. So within the SQLite 3 module, there is a connect function that connects to a database. There's a cursor function. That cursor function, what does is sets a handle, a way of interacting with the file. And then we take that handle and we execute commands, and which in this case is a query to select data. And then within that cursor, that handle, we then fetch that data, the results, and put them here in a data structure. And then we figured out length, we discussed this in previous classes, how much data is there. If there's more than 0 data, then I'm gonna print it out to the screen. Else, I'm gonna say there's no data available. And then I close my cursor and I close my database, right? And again, I went through this again fairly quickly, but I want to emphasize that you know these things. You know, like 90% of how these things work. This script is in the Discord. You can copy paste it, and also the database is in the Discord. And please, by all means, run it yourselves and play with it. Change different elements and try to do different things with it. Change the queries and whatnot. I made also a mention of how the photo timestamp value within the database, you can convert it to a human readable timestamp. So I'm gonna post, I have an article that I did in 2018, like a little blog post on how that works. So I'm gonna actually do it right now. I'm gonna post it on the Discord channel, okay? How to use SQLite datetime function. All right, so go through it whenever you have time, and then you can get familiarized with how you'll see a lot. You'll see all sorts of different time functions in your source data. And if it's SQLite, you can go and change it to a timestamp that's humanly readable. So if I run my script, you can see here, let me go to the top of the data. See like this one here, 2018, the month, and the day and the time, if it's there. And this is the original timestamp as it comes in kind of UTC like Unix epoch format. And we can do that conversion, and the link shows you how to do that within SQLite, okay? All right. If there's any questions on this, hopefully we can discuss them at the end of the 30-minute section. If not, in Discord. But again, don't despair, you know this, it's all about how we put it together. All right. That being said, let's get into the meat and potatoes of today's class. So we talked last time a little bit about this function right here. two functions, our search for vowels and our search for letters. And we kind of discussed it pretty much in detail. So what I'm gonna do is I'm actually gonna get away from this and I'm gonna show you here, let me minimize this. I have a folder where I placed the functions, and then I placed, functions, as a script, and then I placed another script so I could test those functions. So I could call them and test them. What does that mean? So the vsearch.py has the two functions that we defined last class per the book. And I place in that same directory another script called test.py. And what I'm doing is I'm telling it from vsearch, right, that other script, import everything. It will import all my functions at runtime, okay? Therefore, I can call them by their name, search for vowels, and give it some arguments, some data to work with. The book for this chapter explained that you have two ways of calling arguments, right? It could be by positional, just putting the data there, or the other one is by value, well, position and by value, right? This is by position. If it's by value, I might name, let me see what's the name here. The name is phrase. So I could put here phrase, right? And I will change this a little bit so it there, right? So here I'm using the actual name of the variable that's going to receive it. So that way, when it goes into the function, say it's phrase, it will know where it is. The point of that, and actually this is a bad example. Let me use the function in the bottom, which would be a better example. Like in this case, this other function had two values, right? I mean, you could feed it two arguments, right? And this is all in the book. See, you got the first argument called phrase and the second one called letters, right? Therefore, if I'm using assigning by position, this first one, live, love, eat pizza, is gonna be treated as phrase, and the second one, A-I-O-U, is gonna be treated as letters, right? If I wanted to, and it's by the order they're being provided to the function, but if I wanted to inverse it without, I could just here, let me see, I could call it, call this one phrase. Again, I'm not gonna run it. I'm just kind of reviewing quickly what the book says. And then this one, call it, what was it, letters? Yeah. And this one, call it letters. And this, and here I'm actually referencing them by their value, right? Like, go to letters, and this is what the letter is gonna be. Go to phrase, and this is what's gonna be. So no matter the order, the position you feed them to your function, it don't matter. It's gonna work. Right. And again, I'm going a little bit and just literally recapping what the book said. If it sounds a little bit confusing, do review that part of the book, because the important part that I really want to show you that the book doesn't show you is this. In this particular script that I'm doing, like I said, I'm importing my functions as so, right? And I'm taking the output of this function, if any, and I'm gonna place it into this variable on my left. Same thing with the bottom one. I'm gonna go through all this, process these arguments, and actually I wanna leave it just at one. And I'm gonna place that return values over here. And as you remember from the book, here's the return, right? It's gonna return the results of these interactions right here. All right, so let's run it to see what happens. There we go. So it runs appropriately, right? It prints the first one, it prints the second one, okay? The interesting part is, oh, one more thing. Let's say I just decided to import search for vowels, right? If I only decided to, actually, I don't need this part here. I can't type. Let me see. All right, notice this. I decided only to import, in this case, search for vowels. So when my script runs, the first execution, right? The first lines here, this print executes, but then when it goes to look for search for letters, it's not defined. It doesn't find it because I only imported of my functions in this module, I only imported one, all right? If I want to import the next one, I can also just type it out, search for letters, and then I don't need this part because I'm just calling it, I'm just importing the name of the function. I run it, and it works as expected. So the teaching point is you can import individual functions from your modules, or you can import them all by just using the asterisk. Okay. I had my chat up, but I don't know what happened to it. Oh, Brooke, you're gonna be my chat coordinator again. If that makes sense, put me a 1 in the chat because I can't see my chat right now.
I forgot I was on mute. A lot of ones. If there are any zeros, don't be scared to say you're 0.
We're not calling. Look, I cannot even see who's putting 0, so don't feel embarrassed by any
No, there's
means.
no zeros whatsoever. I don't think I've ever seen a single 0. It's all been 1s, which is great.
Yeah, I don't think I'm that good. No, but yeah, and again, put a 0. It's fine. It actually helps. And if you don't, that's cool too. But then in Discord, you can also reach out directly to Brooke or me or her if you don't want to reach out to me. It's fine. All right. So say what?
I said you're way scarier, way more intimidating.
Well, I need a haircut too. You know, what can I tell you? So, all right. So yeah. So you can call by the whole. You can import the whole all the functions, or import them individually, depending on what you're doing. Okay. Now the next step. I'm gonna put here. I'm gonna make a folder called my modules. And if you remember from the chapter, they're saying that okay. And let me move this over. If the module or the functions in those modules are not in the same directory, right? The next step to find them per Python is in the custom location for that script when you install. I forgot the name of it. Hold on, let me get the name of the site package locations. And if it's not there, or the function you're looking for within that module, it will go to the standard library. And if it's not there, then there's a problem. And let's gonna exemplify that. What I did was I took my functions within that module, right, and put them in a folder called my modules, and I'm gonna try to execute this thing. And obviously it doesn't work because it cannot find the module, right? You just can't find it. It's not there. It's not in the same directory, in the working directory of my script being test.py. And it's not in the site package location. It's not in the standard library location. So what the chapter says you should do is prepare your modules and use setup tools and make a module that you could actually install within your Python installation using.
What page is that on?
Yeah, that's page 179 to 183. Yes.
Okay.
And I'll be so yeah. So what you could do is okay, take your modules, make an installable, or make it installable, and then using a command called pip, you can install that and then have access to it because it will place it in the site packages location, right? So pretty much your module, you make what is called a distribution file that you can install using pip. All right. Again, these are pages 170, I said 178, right? Yeah, 178, I think, to 183. Okay, now, this is the thing with that. It's fine, it's good. I use it all the time. Now, in my coding, I found out another way of addressing modules. So I'm gonna show it to you, and then I'll explain why I'm showing this to you after I show it to you. Right, so if you notice, the module, I placed it inside this directory called my modules. So if I go back to my script, I can go here and say my modules, my modules.vsearch. You see that? So now I'm actually referencing the folder that they're in, okay? Assuming the script, it's on the, that module folder is on that same working directory for my script. So when I hit run, it runs. You notice that? I am getting access to the functions in vsearch, this module, by indicating where in that file structure it is. The book recommends, it says that can be done. And I see what the point of the book is, right? I can't say C you know, dash and put like a path. I cannot do that. But I can reference my modules from the folders they are within the directory of my script. Now, why would I do this as opposed to make everything pip installable, right? Well, this is my reason, personal reason. I like to use pip installable files for the type of code that I know I won't change in a long time. Okay. If you look at some of the different tools that we use and that we make installable, even to work my script, you need to install certain things. My scripts personally change a lot. So what I don't want people to download my script and have to pip install things constantly. Does that make sense? I'd rather them just download my script, execute it, and it will find the modules within my folders and work, right? Certain modules that I don't make, that some other people make, I will make sure that they're pip accessible, and then you as the user have to install those because I didn't make them. But if the ones that I make, since I constantly updating my stuff, I rather reference them by here, by this dot notation within the script that I'm giving you. So that way you can just run them, do the pip installs once, and then just update the scripts and run them. Oof, it's kind of hard for me to explain that verbally, but hopefully that makes sense. I'm just adding to the chapter. This is one way of doing that, as opposed to having to go to page 182, 81, 82, and do a package, a distribution file, and then pip install it and all that stuff. I'm not poo-pooing pip installations. That's super important. You need to read those pages and understand them. But for kind of localized things, you can have a folder with all your modules and just use dot and call them out. Call out your modules and use them as appropriately. How's that look in my own scripting? Let me show you. Let me see if I can see the view here. Oops, hit the wrong one. I'm looking for the Things Navigator. Okay, so if you look here at some of my code, I have scripts and I have artifacts, and let's open one of these, for example. Notice how here I am calling from the scripts folder the artifact report module, and then importing a function that does reporting, for example, in this one. Here from the scripts folder, I'm calling another module called ilabfuncs, and then I'm pulling individual functions to do different things. Like this function here is for logging. This function here, TSV, is to create a tab separated values of the data. This is to check if the platform is Windows. So I'm trying to show you some examples of how I use it. Instead of having to make all this pip, go ahead.
Sorry, just to interrupt you before you go on a little bit longer. So question, if you update it, you don't need to redo it at all? I think that was back to pip, is that right?
Yes, so the question kind of was, let's say you update a portion of your script, right? Let's say one of them as a whole, that you would need to update the entire installation folder, that you'd only need to push one update. Is that kind of the thought process behind that as well?
For me, it is, because I don't want to have to do if you change your functions that are within your distribution file, guess what? You need to make a distribution file again, so you can incorporate that change and then pip install that change into your again, I forgot the name, the site package location. Does that make sense? And again, that's not,
actually,
go ahead.
I know, continue. You were still answering that question.
No, I'm saying, and that's not a bad thing. I mean, yes, we want to do distribution files. We want to make it pip installable so other users can use our modules and functions. That's a good thing. But at least for my use, I like this little notation better, because most of the time it's easier for me to make changes and then not require people to do a pip install for new stuff, if that makes sense.
And so I have a question that I think might be related. I'm not sure. When you're like creating creating your own script, or maybe you're using somebody else's script, is there anything you need to keep in mind, I guess, when designing this, that like if you use like I use a computer that's not connected to the internet, is there anything in particular like that you need to be aware of when, like, I know sometimes when you're like installing some of these other modules, there has to be like it seems like there has to be an internet connection. What happens if you have a machine that's isolated from the internet?
And that's an important question, because most of our networks that you do in forensics, especially in law enforcement, is required by policy that you have no internet connection, period. And for obvious reasons. There are ways. So you can take distribution files and put them on a thumb drive and carry them over to the computer and then say pip install from this location. There's other ones I call them wheel files. Hope I pronounced them correctly. WHL files. Let me see if I can find them. The zoom bar gets in the way. All right. Let me see if I remember that correctly at the top of my head. Yeah, they're called, yeah, Python extension packages. So WHL files. And you can Google that on your own time. So what pretty much what that is, you get that file, you put it on a thumb drive, put it on your computer, and then go to that directory with your command line and say, okay, pip install and the name of that .whl file, and it will put those modules within the site package location, and then you can use them. So yeah, there's ways of doing that pip install. If with internet is easier because it kind of reaches out to the servers and pulls them. But if you don't have that option and you need a specific module and you know what the module is named, you can Google that module, look for the WHL file, download that, and then install it. I think there's other ways. I think Troy Snack gave some of his process to do that. I don't have the link, but I'll look it up because he gave like a good step-by-step explanation on how you can update your modules if your system does not have an internet connection for policy reasons or whatever it might be. So I'll look that up, but that's a great question. All righty. So we're good?
Yep.
All right.
I think so. Oh wait, somebody wrote Rodeo Squirrel, whose real name I don't know, and I hope that's your real name. Wrote, will let you compile your script and so PY installer will let you compile your script and import it as an executable file. They can get kind of huge, but it makes portability of a complex program simpler. Oh, that's good to know.
That's excellent. That's an excellent point. That's an excellent point. And I'll be straight with you. My scripts, I don't consider them to be, too hardcore. But if you get to a point, then yeah, absolutely. That's what I'm saying. I'm not poo-pooing on pip or making installable files. Not at all. It's super important. And you should understand this concept in the book and review them. But for smaller things, I like to do it this way. I like to put them all in a folder and just use dot and then call my modules. And that's it. And I do that pretty extensively in my ALEAP and iLeap. And you can see here, like for my artifacts, I put them in this folders and then call them out. Let me open one more just to underline that point. Like here, so you can see here, I'm from scripts. I'm importing a module that keeps track of the version, a module that gives me some different functions that I use. And there's so many, I import them all. Sometimes I import just some particular ones. The search module here, what it does is it looks for data within tar files, zip files, and the file system. So I import everything because I want every function that allows me to search. And I just put it on the scripts, under the scripts directory in here. And to confirm that you see scripts, .search files. So here it is down here, search files. Notice that you don't need to put the extension. You can just write it like that and it will find it, okay? Alrighty. So I wanted to really underline that because the book doesn't show you that, but I think it's a good way of, having that be worked or addressing or importing those modules in that way. Okay, so to finish the class, let's talk about the homework for next week. Oh, for next week. And that homework for next week, I would like to discuss. Because usually I just let you do the homework and that's it, but I would like to discuss it. If you're so kind of sharing your solutions in the Discord channel, that would be appreciated. If you don't want to, because you're embarrassed, that's okay. Then I'll just discuss mine. But if folks discuss their solutions and I find one that's pretty neat, I would like to highlight it and teach it next class, next Tuesday. So what's the homework? If you look at the Discord, right, last night, I placed here a zip file called homework underline files, right? And within it, there will be the Kik database that I've shared previously, and there will also be a copy of the Discord chats in JSON format that we discussed and I shared also previously, okay? And I put in a little bit of sample code in regards to how to go about taking data out of the SQLite, which is pretty much the code that I placed here. And I also gave you an example of a little bit of code on how to pull stuff from JSON files. So the idea is that you start thinking about functions and how to use them. The idea is that, okay, I'm gonna make the code that pulls data from a SQLite, make it a function. I want to make the code that pulls data from Discord, the JSON, make it a function. And if you do that and it's successful, I would have achieved our goal. A stretch goal for you is make a function, and I didn't put it here, but I just said generate a text file report. But if you want to stretch your knowledge or your efforts, try to make a function that will create a report from the SQLite and from the JSON. That's not dependent on the SQLite or the JSON, if that makes sense. So for example, I know that I'm gonna parse my SQLite and I'm gonna pull from it. I want the timestamp, I want the partner JID values, and the body, which is the chat itself from the table. I wanna put it to a text file. From the Discord, I want the timestamp, the author who wrote it, and the content, which is the chat content from that JSON file. I would like to feed that data into a function and produce a report. One function should be able to manage the data from the kick table or from the JSON file. That's a stretch goal. If you don't achieve it, that's okay. That's kind of a challenge. All right, like one function that's able to take the data from both the other two functions and print it out. Not print it, I'm sorry, make it a text file. That's a stretch goal. But for the actual purposes of the goal for the homework is make a function that pulls the data out, puts it on to the screen and to a file, and then do a function that pulls the data out from JSON, put it to the screen, and put it to a file. And to help you with that,
I say to be clear, we can't use your script that does this, right?
Well, I mean, the script gives you some ideas. Like, look at this one I have on screen right now. Here, I call this called test.py. You can call it whatever you want. And what am I doing? I am calling my functions, right? And my functions are inside a module. You notice that? And the results, I put them in a variable, what's returned. What else could I do logically, right? I call this function, gave me the results. I call this function, gave me the results. What should I do here to print it out to a file? I could then make another, I mean, it's me verbally giving you an idea of how to do it. You can have another function that will take these things, right, as arguments, and then the function will print it into a file. Does that make sense? So what I'm showing you here is kind of like a heads up of how you could do it. You could do it differently though. This is just one way. You could have here an extra function that does the printing for you, right? And I say printing to the screen and printing to the creation of a file. And if you're wondering, how do I create a file? Well, remember the Discord class we had previously, we discussed and I gave you some code on how to take that data and put it in a file. So that's part of the zip file that's contained here. So from my perspective as the instructor, I think you should have enough data to do all the goals, including the stretch goal. But if you don't do it, don't feel bad, because again, I'm doing this as a challenge, right? It's not that easy until you do it. So that's okay.
So what I might end up doing is like posting on Discord and be like SOS help. So,
oh no, absolutely. Please do.
Team effort.
Please do, but keep in mind what I just showed you. Oops, sorry, I didn't want to close this. Keep in mind this example that I have here of how make your modules, make your functions, and put them in a module. Make sure you can import that module, and then call them, and give it whatever parameters you need to give it. If you need to give it parameters, right? You might not want to give it parameters, and that's fine. Mm-hmm. And then with whatever the results are, then you can go through them. Another hint from the book, from this chapter. Remember, functions are made to return how many arguments back? To return how many values, I should say. How many values can you return in a function? If anybody remembers. It's kind of tough. It's kind of like, it was just one sentence of the chapter that said that. I'll tell you. Just one. So you can only return one, using the return function, only one value. Now, I say values, I shouldn't say value. Let me put it this way, one object, okay? What does that mean? That means that if I have a lot of values that I want to return back, I should put them within an object. And what objects do we know that hold multiple values? We know how to do lists. We know how to do dictionaries. We know how to do sets. We know how to do, what's the other one? Tuples, right? So those objects, you can have all the data you want in them and then return the whole object out. And then outside of it, you can iterate with for loops, as we discussed in previous classes, to get that data out. Hopefully this makes sense. If it doesn't, at least the words make sense. Watch the video class and then slowly start thinking about those, because you know what a list is. You know what objects are. You know that you can iterate through them and how to iterate through them. We discussed all that to the 200 so pages of the book. So just keep that in mind.
Feel free also, like, I might do this, like, going through the assignments, posting on Discord and be like, SOS, what do people think of this? So people
And that's the idea of the Discord.
Way to reach out.
I'll tell you 20 things, and actually for the part of returning one value, is page 158, okay? And 158 and 159, where it explains that returns and functions is just one value, but you can return more than one value if you put your values inside a data structure like a list or a set or whatever it is. So page 158 and 159. So again, those 2 pages is literally says returning one value there. So that will help you with the assignment if you're using functions as we've been learning. And again, feel free to ask questions in Discord or share code snippets and asking why this doesn't work, or what I'm trying to attempt is X. How do I go about it? And we'll be more than happy to help. All right, Brooke, does that make sense? You'll be my filter today. Does it work?
I think it makes sense. What do other people think? Quiet class. 1. Oh, good. Yay. Okay. What are the total pages that we need to read to be caught up? Total number of pages, or what page are we up to? Is that?
Yeah, that's a lot of reading, right?
Because we haven't skipped around. We are at the end. Where are we actually?
Well, let me. So for next class, I want to finish chapter 4 and start chapter 5. Now, chapter 5 is not going to be as clear cut because again, chapter 5, and again, we're having a discussion on how to move forward. But as we have the discussion, I might still at least cover a little bit of chapter 5. I was thinking all the way to page. Let me see here. Is it decorators? I don't want to talk about decorators yet. No, let me go back a little bit. Let's stop at at page 206.
So what I'm thinking then is maybe going through Discord, coming up with a post that has the assignments for each class. Briggs, I'll ask you to review it to make sure that it's correct. Mm-hmm. And whether, I don't know about how to post, I've posted on Discord all that much, to be honest, but having a list of the assignments for each class for people who've missed them, maybe seeing if there's a way to put the files for each class to make sure people can get caught up that way. Okay. Something cumulative that people can see. Yeah. And what
I'm sorry to interrupt. Let me stop the recording. At this point, this is more like admin stuff. So that's today's class. So I'm going to stop the recording now.